Mr. Speaker.
Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this house here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen. Amen. Namaste.
Oath or affirmation. Announcements by the Speaker.
Honorable members, Honorable Maxi Coffey, MP, member for La Hoketa Talparo, has requested leave of absence from sittings of the House from 3rd to the 20th February 2018. The Honorable Randall Mitchell, MP, member for San Fernando East, has requested leave of absence from sittings of the House during the period February 8th to 19th, 2018. Mr. Rushton Parry, MP, member for Miaru, has requested leave of absence from sittings of the House during the period February 16th to 23rd, 2018. And Mr. Fazal Karim, MP, member for Shogunas East, Mr. David Lee, MP, member for Pointe-a-Fer, Ms. Marlene MacDonald, MP, member for Port of Spain South, and Mr. Prakash Ramada, MP, member for St. Augustine, have requested leave of absence from today's sitting of the House. The leave which the members seek is granted.
Bills brought from the Senate. Petitions. Papers.
The Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have the honor to lay the following papers. The audited financial statements of Portfolio Credit Management Limited for the financial year ended December 31st, 2016. The audited financial statements of National Information and Communication Technology Company Limited for the financial year ended September 30th, 2017. The audited financial statements of MIC Institute of Technology for the financial years ended September 30th, 2011 and 2014, and the report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago for the years ended September 30th, 2010 and 2011. I beg to move that papers 1 to 4 be referred to the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee and papers 5 to 6 be referred to the Public Accounts Committee.
Honorable members, the question is that papers 1 to 4 be referred to the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee and papers 5 to 6 be referred to the Public Accounts Committee. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. The Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the following papers. Paper number 7, the response of the Auditor General's Department to the 12th report of the Public Accounts Committee on the examination of the report of the Auditor General on the public accounts of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year 2016. Paper number 8, the response of the Auditor General's Department to the 13th report of the Public Accounts Committee on the examination of the report of the Auditor General on the public accounts of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year 2016, with specific reference to the Ministry of Finance. Paper number 9, the response of the Auditor General's Department to the 14th report of the Public Accounts Committee on the examination of the report of the Auditor General on the public accounts of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year 2016, with specific reference to the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries. Paper number 10, the ministerial response of the Ministry of Public Utilities to the 9th report of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee on the examination of the audited accounts, balance sheet, and other financial statements of the telecommunications services of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial years 2008 to 2016. Paper number 11, the ministerial response of the Ministry of National Security to the 4th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee on the examination of the system of internal audit within the public service. Paper number 12, the response of the Service Commissions Department to the 5th report of the Joint Select Committee on Local Authorities, Service Commissions, and Statutory Authorities, including the THA, on the inquiry into the efficiency and effectiveness of the Police Service Commission. Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker.
Minister of Trade and Industry.
Madam Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Trade and Industry, I have the honor to lay paper number 13, the administrative report of the Export-Import Bank of Trinidad and Tobago Limited for the year ended December 31st, 2015. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Reports from committees.
The member for Maruga Tableland.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to present the 7th report of the Joint Select Committee on Local Authorities, Service Commissions, and Statutory Authorities, including the THA, on an inquiry into the efficiency and effectiveness of the Public Service Commission.
Prime Minister's questions.
Member for Caroni Central.
Could the Prime Minister inform this House, after close to some 30 months in the life of this government, what he considers the most significant achievement of his government thus far by the administration?
Madam Speaker, it is with great satisfaction that I'm able to report to my colleague on the other side 10 of the things that we've been able to accomplish. Firstly, Madam Speaker, protection of the National Treasury. The Treasury is now in safe hands. Secondly, Madam Speaker, elimination in governmental activity of the rampant corruption that existed before. Thirdly, Madam Speaker, stabilization of the economy, managing under very tight fiscal arrangements and extensive debt to keep the economy stable. Fourthly, Madam Speaker, preservation of jobs. Fifthly, Madam Speaker, significant reduction in waste in public expenditure. Sixthly, Madam Speaker, initiation of a development program, which is largely supported by a recovery of approximately $1 billion from the Point 14 highway project. Seventh, Madam Speaker, initiation of efforts to diversify the economy in the areas of industry and tourism. Eighth, Madam Speaker, settlement of upstream gas pricing contracts to deal with the ongoing curtailment, bringing about some stability in contracting and prices. 9, Madam Speaker, identification and agreement for additional gas supplies from outside our borders so that we can continue into the medium and long term to be a gas producer. And 10th, Madam Speaker, commencement of corruption proceedings against persons and entities who have stolen public money.
Supplemental.
Is the Prime Minister aware that while all of these things might be good intentions, the reality on the ground is that the debt has in fact gone up by about 12% during the time? Yes, these are questions. That
Member,
the job...
One question at a time, 15 minutes.
But the Prime
15
Minister
seconds.
asked 10 things, said 10 things.
Member. You have 15 seconds to ask. Please ask the question.
Is the Prime Minister aware that under his government, the debt has increased by about 12%? And secondly, that the jobs that he's...
Please, member. There are 4 supplementals. You can ask one. Prime Minister.
I'm very aware, Madam Speaker, of the state of the debt and its movement, the steepest part of the curve being the debt that was incurred under the last government. And with respect to any continuing increase under this administration, Madam Speaker, that increase was largely paying off debt incurred by the last government. And Madam Speaker, the largest of which was the back pay of almost $5 billion to public servants on the way out of office. So, Madam Speaker, I'm aware of it, he's aware of it, you're aware of it.
Currently Central, supplemental.
Is the Prime Minister aware that there have in fact been job losses in this country to a significant degree in both the public and private sector, and it is registered in terms of the labor force participation?
One question, Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, the government and the country are very aware that there have been job losses, but there also have been job creation opportunities as well. And Madam Speaker, it is impossible. It is impossible, Madam Speaker. If you don't want to hear the answer, just let me know, you know. Madam Speaker, it is impossible for us to manage our national situation, which is impacted by significant revenue reductions without some action, positive or negative, on the job creation or losses situation. So it's no news that there have been some job losses, but there have also been job creations. For example, on the Point 14 project, as we put the money back to work that was about to be stolen, a number of persons are now on the job.
For now, supplemental.
The Prime Minister indicated as one of the achievements the elimination of waste. Does he stand by that in the context of the 100 million on fake oil, 92,000 in Tobago? The group DC lobbies $16 million. 2.5 million for a fetch match to open the Brian Lara Academy, and 3.5 for the chair of the CL Financial on sexual harassment charges. Are you willing?
Madam Speaker, I just want the member to know, this obsession with the Brian Lara, the opening of the Brian Lara Stadium was a profitable exercise because the costs were less than the revenues, and that means it was profitable. And Madam Speaker, with respect to the other matters, right, I can simply say that none of those could be pointed as benefiting any individual in this government, unlike the last government.
But for Oropuch West, member for Caroni Central.
Can the Prime Minister indicate, I heard him to say, that the upstream negotiations have been settled. Can the Prime Minister indicate whether this has had any effect on the downstream problems that we have had recently, and whether this was fully taken into account in the negotiations if they were settled?
Madam Speaker, as you may recall, contracts in this country had been left unattended, and in fact, the settlement of that has been one of the better achievements of this government because it gave us an opportunity to stay in the gas business. And yes, we did take into account the downstream, because if you don't produce upstream, there is no downstream industry to take into account.
the presentation of the Welsh Health Report by the government, could the Prime Minister inform this House why has the government not implemented many of the recommendations made in this report?
Madam Speaker, this is really a question coming from my colleague, which ought not to be answered. In this very House, Madam Speaker, in this very House, we took the Welsh report to the members of Parliament by way of a joint select committee. Those on the other side refused to participate in the joint select committee and is coming now to ask me what? Coming to ask me what now? The joint select committee on the Welsh report was placed before this House, and the reason why it has not functioned to date is because those on the other side flatly refused to participate in a report about healthcare delivery in this country. They're only playing politics and asking nonsensical questions.
Would you indicate then, as the government, whether you do not have the authority to implement the recommendations of the report despite what you said? You are in charge.
Madam Speaker, I do not wish to be told I'm in charge by the member. We are in charge, we are the government, and that's why we are implementing the measures. We are implementing the measures as and when they become implementable.
Bearing in mind that all the recommendations are implementable, why is the Prime Minister evading the implementation of these recommendations?
Madam Speaker, I do not know where you got the impression from that all the recommendations are implementable. A report makes recommendations. It does not mean that all the recommendations are implementable and implementable today.
So if not all, but some are implementable, why are you not implementing the some or nothing? Or nothing?
Madam Speaker, I have just said that we are implementing as and when they are available to be implemented. So it is quite improper to say that we are not implementing any of the recommendations.
Member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Prime Minister, could the Prime Minister inform this House if the MV Galleon Passage has set sail from China to Trinidad and Tobago?
Madam Speaker, to the best of my information, the vessel has not set sail as yet because it's awaiting some clearance as soon as the public service arrangements in China are available.
Could the Prime Minister indicate to this House when the agreement was signed to purchase the boat, if a timeline of delivery was indicated to the government of Trinidad and Tobago?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, yes, a timeline was indicated. That timeline has been impacted upon by the administration of the Chinese New Year, and as soon as that gets out of the way, in a few days' time, the timeline will be revised.
Supplemental member for Couva South.
Could the Prime Minister clear the air in terms of whether the delay has anything to do with the fact that the engines that have been designed for this boat in China is not in keeping with what would be needed in traversing between Trinidad and Tobago?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, that is misinformation meant to create mischief. I have no such information and no such consideration applies to this vessel.
Member for Naprima.
Minister, in setting the timelines for the arrival of the boat in Trinidad and Tobago, were the government aware at that time of the Chinese New Year celebrations?
Madam Speaker, it is not the first time that plans that were made would have failed because they were impacted by unforeseen circumstances. The government of Trinidad and Tobago had to hire commercial agents to put a crew together and so on. These things take certain considerations into account, and when they were completely ready to move, they were impacted by circumstances beyond their control. And we'd rather be safe than be sorry.
Member for Orupuchis. Member for Naprima.
Would the Prime Minister not agree that if proper procurement policies were put in place, consistent with the procurement legislation, these things would have been foreseen by the government?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I do not understand what the procurement legislation has to do with it. The vessel was properly procured by properly procurement procedures, and therefore that question has no merit.
Member for Tabaki.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Honourable Prime Minister, could you indicate whether the Southern Command of the United States Army and or the FBI is involved in the surveillance, intelligence gathering and detention of potential terrorists in Trinidad and Tobago as reported by CNN?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I have not watched CNN for a number of weeks, so I cannot speak to CNN's reporting. What I can do is to indicate, as I've done on many occasions to the national community, that in this question of responding to our exposure to terrorist activities and similar, that Trinidad and Tobago does not stand alone, should not and must not stand alone. And we cooperate with a number of countries, mainly the United States, Britain, Australia, and any other country that has exposure and or experience to terrorism, and we share information for our mutual benefit.
Supplementary member for Tabakit.
Is the Prime Minister confirming, therefore, that the United States Southern Command was involved in the recent identification of potential terrorists and had a hand in the determination to pick up people and interrogate them?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, for the nth time, the picking up of people and the interrogation of people in Trinidad and Tobago has been done 100% by the state agencies of Trinidad and Tobago. And we've said on many occasions that in monitoring, in treating with threats of this nature, that we share information with agencies of the United States and other countries.
Member for Old Cheese.
Thank you very much. Given that the carnival is over and cannot be disrupted again, could the Prime Minister indicate what specific threat to disrupt the carnival existed that caused these events?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, the government of Trinidad and Tobago, through its ongoing monitoring, became aware of threats from persons who subscribe to that kind of behavior that we have become accustomed to in the 21st century. The threat that we specifically responded to was a threat to take action against the carnival parades by persons of interest to the security services of Trinidad and Tobago.
Supplemental member for Caroni East.
How would you account, Honourable Prime Minister, for the conflicting statements between the Minister of National Security and yourself with regards the involvement of the United States in this issue?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, a lot of effort is being made to look for conflict. If one stays with the facts, you will see no conflict. The operations in Trinidad and Tobago were led by and involved the security services personnel of Trinidad and Tobago. Other personnel of other countries, with suppliers, with support, information, and equipment. And Madam Speaker, we are eternally grateful. And I thank all those agencies for the work they have done in securing the population, and we continue to thank our partners internationally for the support they give to the people of Trinidad and Tobago in the face of the threats that we live with.
You said that you were aided by the U.S. with equipment. Is the U.S. actually using equipment to monitor activities in Trinidad and Tobago on behalf of the government?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I've said no such thing, and I will not now say it.
Member for Caroni Central. Member for Tabaki. Sorry, member for Tabaki.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Honourable Prime Minister, are you convinced that there was and continues to be a credible threat to national security as announced by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service over the last 2 weeks?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, as Chairman of the National Security Council, I see on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis the existential threats to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. On this particular occasion, yes, I continue to be concerned, and I'm convinced that we faced a credible threat.
Supplementary member for Tabaki.
Honourable Prime Minister, 13 persons were taken in and held. of which a number have been released, I believe up to 6 or 8 have been released. Why are these people being released if in fact this threat was so credible?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, that is a matter of law enforcement and for law enforcement into which I would not venture. However, to say that the fact that they have been released or the fact that nothing has happened is proof that nothing could have happened is pure folly.
Member for Caroni Central.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could the Prime Minister, in his capacity as head of the National Security Council, assure this nation that the security services in the country have the intelligence capability and wherewithal to protect our citizens from surprise attacks by extremist groups?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, the very fact that the attack is described as surprise, that in itself should tell you that it might be surprising to whatever you put in place. However, I want to give the country the assurance that we have been improving our ability to monitor, to intercept, and to respond. And that ability is one of our primary efforts, and we continue to improve in that area. Madam Speaker, the threat that we face is a very amorphous one. And in fact, it changes its shape, its size, its location, and the government of Trinidad and Tobago, through its many agencies, is required to be able to respond along the way. We have been improving the quality of our personnel, improving the training by, once again, I must mention that we do so through international contacts, international reports. We place persons outside. We actually communicate with and bring people into Trinidad and Tobago to assist us with the training. We improve our technical capabilities and so on. But when you bear in mind, Madam Speaker, that the nature of this particular threat, which could lead to a surprise attack, is one that resides within communication in the internet, on the telephone, and by doctrines which are alien to us, this threat, as it exists in Trinidad and Tobago and elsewhere in the world, will be with us for quite a while and challenge us continuously.
I know that this is an answer that has to do with the security of the state, and he has to be circumspect. But are there ISIS, is there anything in Trinidad and Tobago that can be considered an ISIS cell or an ISIS satellite?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, it is common knowledge across the world, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, that citizens of Trinidad and Tobago subscribe to some of the doctrines of ISIS, and persons from Trinidad and Tobago have traveled to areas of combat in Iraq and Syria. Many of them have been intercepted in Turkey, in Britain. Some have been returned to Trinidad and Tobago. Some are in custody in foreign countries, persons who seek to join ISIS. And in fact, as ISIS has been dispersed in Iraq and Syria, that doctrine now is spread to homebound activities, and therefore we have to be particularly concerned about such persons, and the monitoring of such persons is an integral part of our national security. And the answer to the question is yes.
Supplemental member for Kumuto Mansinala.
Prime Minister, in light of the fact that you made a statement that your government's ability to gather intelligence working with other countries, does this, in fact, was the fact that our Prime Minister, Kamala Prasad-Biswas, at that time, who signed an agreement with
Member,
the
15
US
seconds to ask your question, please.
to bring together assistance for our country, has this aided in your ability to gather intelligence and to work with other countries?
Prime Minister.
I have no idea what that confused question was about. This has nothing to do with any signing of any agreement. The United States, Britain, India, Pakistan, these are all countries that we've had and continue to have relations with in this matter.
Member for Naparima.
Prime Minister, in view of the fact that 3 weeks ago the Canadian government in the Canadian Parliament said that they are actively monitoring 61 returning Canadian terrorists, could you give us similar information into how many terrorists have returned and give us the assurance that they are being effectively monitored?
Madam Speaker, the figure of how many terrorists have returned is a floating figure, because not everyone who goes abroad and comes back is deemed to be a terrorist. And the intent of persons would vary. However, in monitoring persons who we have reason to believe pose a threat to the country, I don't know whether the figure is 63 or 100, but we are taking steps to ensure that all persons who are so described are adequately monitored. Madam Speaker, it is not possible to monitor 24 hours a day every citizen in this country. But those persons whom the security services have deemed to be such would also be monitored. And the guarantees that we can give is that the security services continue to pay attention to persons who threaten the stability and security of Trinidad and Tobago.
Supplemental, Caroni Central.
Could the Prime Minister indicate whether he feels that our security forces here have the ability and capacity to monitor communication between an international ISIS operation and local presence here in Trinidad and Tobago?
Madam Speaker, I don't know any country is able to say that, because the communication is so varied and so technical. In fact, there's an area called the dark web where it is said that the criminals and terrorists are better able to handle it than states. And of course, we do have and we are improving our own ability to monitor. But I tell you something else, Madam Speaker. People who are going down that road of attempting to become effective terrorists are not now only relying on those kinds of communication. For example, they would rely only on face-to-face communication between family members. They rely on other kinds of communication because they know that we are monitoring them. And many of them do not use the system because they know you're monitoring them. And therefore, they use other systems. In fact, they can even use the walkie-talkies, which are not on the telephoning system. And they make up their own system as long as they are intent on being involved in criminal activity. They continue to change their methods and so on.
Member for Kamutu Mansinela, might I ask, having regard to the supplementals and the responses, whether you're still interested in question 7? Yes, you still,
on what it is.
No, that question is over. I'm asking with respect to question 7. Are you still interested in asking question 7?
Yes.
Okay. Member Kamutu Mansinela.
In light of the recent reports of planned terrorist activities during the recently concluded carnival season, could the Honorable Prime Minister inform this House what steps are being taken by his government to ensure the safety and security of the national community post-Carnival 2018?
Madam Speaker, I just spent the last 10 minutes answering that question. And if I might only add that last September, I think it was, the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago approved and is operationalizing a counter-terrorism strategy.
Supplemental.
Thank you. Honorable Prime Minister, what communication strategy has been effectively put in place for mass communication of the citizens should a serious threat arise, seeing that there's a communication in place?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, we have agencies of the state, the Office of Disaster Preparedness, and beyond that, we do have communication from the Office of the Commissioner of Police. And beyond that, I do not wish to expose any further our communication strategy, which might be specific to certain situations, to alert persons who might be under observation.
Honorable Prime Minister, are you saying that if a threat had to take place, that the citizens would not be aware of what they are required to do until it actually happens?
And I will not allow that. That was not said. Member for Couva South.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, Prime Minister, in your capacity as the head of the National Security Council, are you prepared to take the necessary steps to ensure that the vacant positions of 1,100 police officers, as indicated by Deputy Commissioner of Police Devdat Dulachan, is filled?
Well, Madam Speaker, Deputy Commissioner Dulal Chan says we need to fill 1,000 posts. Commissioner Gibbs said we have too many officers.
Member for Caroni East.
With respect to the Honourable Maxi Coffey, the Member of Parliament, could the Prime Minister indicate the general state of his health, an expected return date to official duties, as well as the cost to the country so far on both the Minister's medical management in the United States and his treatment in Trinidad and Tobago?
Madam Speaker, the information we received from MP Maxi Coffey through his family is that he has made considerable progress from whenever he experienced the medical episode as described by his doctor. And he has made considerable progress and is likely to return to the country in the not too distant future. And at that time, his ability to continue the job that he was doing before would be assessed. The government of Trinidad and Tobago intervened to assist Minister Coffey at a time when his life was being threatened. The government, through the normal procedures available to members of the cabinet ministers, paid a bill at, well, I think the bill has been paid, but incurred an expense on his behalf at St. Clair Medical in the sum of $980,000, $263.69. That brought MP Coffey to a situation where it was recommended that his recuperation would be improved and his condition stabilized if he got treatment abroad urgently. And at that stage, the government of Trinidad and Tobago kept an assistance through air ambulance of $46,000 US and a stroke recovery program of $171,000 US. Those are the bills incurred by the state with respect to the life-threatening condition of Minister Coffey.
Honourable members, the time for Prime Ministerial questions is now spent.
Questions.
Member for Oropuch West.
To the Minister of National Security, could the Minister indicate whether an investigation has been launched to deal with reports of high absenteeism by officers of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service during Carnival 2018?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Commissioner of Police has in fact advised that an investigation has been launched to deal with reports of absenteeism of officers during the Carnival 2018.
Supplemental, Member for Oropuch West.
Honourable Minister, can you kindly indicate how many officers were absent?
Madam Speaker, based on information from the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, there has in fact been a 4% increase in the number of officers reporting for duty over 2017. Of the 5,000 Carnival strength detailed, there was an absence of 808 officers over the Carnival period.
Honourable Minister, in light of the high absenteeism, do you think there was a direct correlation between that high absence and the high number of tourists that were robbed?
Member, I will not allow that as a supplemental question. Member for Princestown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, to the Honourable Minister. Honourable Minister, did you anticipate that this situation would have occurred with respect to these high absenteeism, in that on the last occasion when I asked how many officers, you could not say would have been deployed?
For Princestown, you've asked the question. Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, I indicated a while ago that there was in fact a 4% increase in the number of officers turned out for duties compared to 2017. So the word high absenteeism is relative. There has been an increase. And as I mentioned, of the 5,000 Carnival officers detailed for duties, 800 were absent. And in cases like that, Madam Speaker, there's always a contingency plan. So there are more officers that detail for duty with expectation. There are sometimes genuine absentees, for sickness or otherwise. And that is built into the detailing of officers for duties over the carnival period. So that was taken into consideration. Additionally, some of the absentees were based on my information were basically SRPs who, in fact, were not released from their employers because the necessary administrative work was not done. Madam Speaker.
Member for Orpooch West.
Madam Speaker, to the Minister of Public Utilities. Given that the shutdown of the Point Lisa's desalination plant on February 13, 2018, affected many citizens in Central and South Trinidad, could the Minister provide the reasons for the reoccurring shutdown of the Point Lisa's desalination plant?
Minister of Public Utilities.
Madam Speaker, the previous shutdown of this desalination plant was on January the 15th to the 20th, was for annual scheduled maintenance. On Tuesday the 13th of February, at about 7:30 p.m., a breakdown occurred. It took 26 hours of concerted round-the-clock troubleshooting by DesalCut engineers, technicians, and expert specialists, contractors, to pinpoint the problem, which was the failure of a pair of control net adapters. Temporary repairs have been effected to allow for the plant to be fully operational, and replacement modules have been immediately ordered and are due to arrive in the country on Monday. The plant is now up and running.
Supplemental member for Orpooch West.
Thank you. Honourable Minister, could you give a number of the persons, a total number that were affected by the shutdown? Households, total number of households.
Madam Speaker, I do not have that information on me readily, but if you need, I could probably attempt to find and provide it to the House at a later date.
Supplemental member for Cuba South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister, given what he has just indicated to the House, Mr. Minister, could you indicate when there will be a full restoration of the water supply? Because as we speak, in the constituency of Cuba South, the water supply has not been restored.
Minister of Public Utilities.
Madam Speaker, when the plant is shut down and is brought back up, it takes approximately 3 days after for the plant to be able to get back up to the level of the supply it was previously, or previous to the shutdown. So I would expect that this happened on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Definitely by Saturday, the plant will be up to its level. That being said, we have been providing truck-borne water supplies to the areas, to the affected individuals.
Member for Orpooch East.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, could the Minister indicate the circumstances that led to the levy by contractors on the head office of CPEP just this morning?
Minister of Rural Development and Local Government.
Madam Speaker, in the absence of the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, I would like to provide this answer. In 2015, when this administration took office, it had been found that the CPEP company had been used as a project manager for the health sector between 2010 and 2015. This administration met outstanding amounts to be paid on those contracts in the amount of $148 million. That was the debt that we met when we came into office in relation to those particular projects. CPEP attempted to verify these contracts through the Ministry of Health in order to get the value, whether the value was correct, and whether the payment should be made. But this was not, but the company was not successful in achieving this. The contractors who were owed decided to take the matters to court, so the company received a number of pre-action protocol letters. The CPEP board took the decision not to use its subvention monies to pay these outstanding contracts, as it would have further compounded and compromised the financial position of the company. Subsequently, CPEP took on legal counsel because completion certificates were signed off by the previous management and board. The lawyers felt, therefore, that there would not be a strong case. The court has now ruled against the CPEP company. The company does not have the funds to pay the outstanding amount of $148 million left as a debt by the last administration, and there was no proper documentation to prove the amount or to defend the amount that was being claimed.
Remember, the time is now spent. Supplemental member for Orpuchis.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, could the Minister clarify whether the court judgment was for $148 million?
Minister of Rural and Development and Local Government.
Madam Speaker, the amount, as far as I am aware, was a total of $148 million. For several of the matters, I am not completely sure of the full amount of the court decision, but we are of the view and we understand that there are more judgments to come. Right now, our information is that the paperwork has been destroyed and that today CPEP was levied for the outstanding amount of $2 million. A part payment of $500,000 was made, but Madam Speaker, there is still an outstanding amount to be paid. The paperwork has been destroyed.
Supplemental member for Orpuchis.
Thank you very much. Is the Minister aware that the member for St. Joseph proudly opened medical facilities at Mount Hope refurbished by CPEP?
Madam Speaker, I'm sure the member for St. Joseph was proud to open the facilities, but that doesn't mean that there was not an overpayment. And that also does not mean that there were not corrupt practices. And Madam Speaker, CPEP was not a company developed for this purpose, for the purpose of supervising or project managing contracts of this nature. And Madam Speaker, I wish to reiterate that there were no proper documents found. And Madam Speaker, this is not the only company in which we found these circumstances with no proper documentation. And in the circumstances in 2015, when we came into office, there were a number of situations like this resulting in default judgments, Madam Speaker.
Question 4 to the member of Orpuch East.
Thank you. Question for Madam Speaker to the Honourable Minister of Works and Transport. I do have to read it.
Yes. And we have to read it.
Sorry. Could the Minister indicate the cost? Could the Minister indicate the cost to the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago for sending passengers on Caribbean Airlines Limited as a result of the collapse of the sea bridge from February 1st, 2018 to this time?
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm hearing the chant of wasting money, but I can tell you that the government of this government do care about the people of Tobago and the people of Trinidad and Trinidad. Madam Speaker, on the 8th of February, there was a rough seas bulletin issued in Trinidad and Tobago. Unfortunately, the vessels that ply the sea bridge were not allowed to risk the waters and put the passengers' life at stake. We couple that with the fact that the charter, the class certification, was under review. The Port Authority decided, in the interest of the tourist industry in Tobago and for all the citizens who would have planned their carnival vacation, to undertake the cost of ensuring that all passengers who would have had a confirmed booking on the sea bridge was allowed to be transported to and from Tobago. Madam Speaker, the cost to the port as of now, the preliminary cost is just about $500,000. And I'm here in Wu, but if you understand the operations at the port, Madam Speaker, just the cost of the fuel for that period have surpassed the cost of the tickets. So in other words, the port would have so far saved money. All right? So, and Madam Speaker, it just tells you what we are trying to correct at the port, some of the inefficiencies at the port. But this is a clear example of some of the challenges at the port. The port actually saved money by sending people on the sea bridge, on the air bridge.
Supplementary member for Puchis.
Very much, Minister, for an answer of sorts. Could the Minister indicate, bearing in mind you mentioned the removal of a vessel because of the rough seas, could you indicate why the TNT Express, which was removed, why the Port Authority failed to get a renewal of their class certificate from the international body DNV?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is public knowledge that these vessels would have been extended for the last 2 years. On the 8th of February, the class certification would have been expired. You couple that with the rough seas bulletin, there was some work that the DNV would have asked the port to correct. And I'm happy to say that the rough seas bulletin would have been removed today. The work has been done, and we are expecting the vessel to be in the water operating by tomorrow. Thank you.
South.
Madam Speaker, could the Minister indicate the sum that he has indicated to the House of 500,000? Does it include flights that have been put on today too? Baikal?
Madam Speaker, as I said, those are preliminary figures that have taken into consideration today's flight. Thank you.
Time is now spent, member for Caroni.
I'll take it out.
Questions or notice? Questions for oral answer.
Leader of the House.
Madam Speaker, we are asking for a deferral of questions 86 and 87, please. We answer the 8 other questions.
Okay, so the deferral for numbers 86 and 87 have been granted. Member for Shogunas East. Member for Oropuch West.
Question number 78 to the Minister of Health.
Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to Oropuch West for the question. As part of the strategic framework to reduce the growing burden of non-communicable diseases on the health sector, the following initiatives are proposed for implementation in 2018 to reduce the current obesity rate in Trinidad and Tobago. 1, the prohibition of sale and sweetened beverages in all government and government-assisted schools with effect from April 2017. 2, development of key policy instruments to support the Healthy Schools Initiative, namely National Health Promotion Policy, the National Food and Nutrition Policy, and the National Policy on Physical Activity. 3, a national screening program for gestational diabetes in collaboration with the Diabetes Education, Research and Prevention Institute. 4, the completion of the evaluation of the school food options and survey of body mass index, BMI, in primary and secondary schools by March 2018, next month, and the subsequent hosting of a symposium on healthy children to share these results with the aim of updating the current programs and policies across sectors. Next, the completion of the National Nutrition Standards for food sold or offered in schools with a supporting action plan inclusive of guidelines for cafeteria operators and school food service providers. Next, the implementation of the new World Health Organization's growth monitoring standards in the RHAs, commencing with monitoring the growth of children under 5 years old in primary healthcare facilities. Next, the development and piloting of the Healthy Schools Promotion Initiative, with selection of primary schools to encourage children to eat healthier foods and to be more physically active. Next, the completion of the primary school healthy lifestyle quiz, which was held during the period January 31st to February 7th, 2018, of which over 87 schools and 500 students participated. The joint winners were the Dianan Memorial Vedic School and the Montrose Vedic School. Notably, the above initiatives have been framed along the following lines of action. 1, primary health care and promotion of breastfeeding and healthy eating. 2, improving school nutrition and physical activity environments. And 3, fiscal policies and regulation of food marketing and labeling. 4, surveillance, research, monitoring, and evaluation. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Question number 76. Whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could the Minister inform the House when the restructuring process for Petrotrin will be completed to the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries?
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Board of Directors of Petrotrin has been given a mandate to return the company to profitability as soon as is practicable. At this time, the Board is examining a number of strategic alternatives to achieve this objective and is actively, as we speak, consulting with all of Petrotrin's stakeholders. Given the complexity of this matter, no specific date for completion of the required restructuring can be given at this time. However, given the very serious financial position of the company, an early report by the Board is expected, and it is also expected that the restructuring process will commence this year, 2018.
Supplemental member for Caroni East.
Are you aware of any proposed restructuring plan for the over $10 billion debt owed by Petrotrin?
Well, obviously, all that is being considered because it is a bullet payment in 2019 for $850 million US. The state is not in a position to come up with that type of cash, so obviously we'll have to look at restructuring that portfolio.
When?
Supplemental member for Tabakit.
Minister, for a matter as serious as Petrotrin, which has been losing so much money, and in which possibly so many jobs are at stake, do you think it's fair to the country and to Petrotrin employees and stakeholders to simply say that we don't have a date when this restructuring exercise will be completed?
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Madam Speaker, through you, this is a very complex company, and we are facing very complex issues. Mr. Manning had us saying, hurry dog, eat our meat. And I think that is the context in which we're looking at this. We have to understand that we are taking some serious strategic decisions. It has to be well thought out, and in the environment in which we operate, we must have maximum consultation with the stakeholders. That is what we are doing. And we're acting with extreme haste in this matter. But what we do not want to do is commit ourselves to a timeline as specific as you want us to do.
Member for Tabakit, supplemental.
In the meantime, Mr. Minister, what is being done, therefore, to stem the corruption and to stem the waste and mismanagement at Petrotrin?
I will not allow that as a question flowing out to the question or the answer given. Member for Orpooch West.
Number 79 to the Minister of Health.
Minister of Health.
Again, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thank you again to Orpooch West. One of the strategic objectives of the Non-Communicable Diseases Plan is the reduction in prevalence of the main NCD risk factors and strengthening of protective factors, with an emphasis on children and adolescents and on vulnerable populations using evidence-based health promotion strategies. In collaboration with the Ministry of Education, and I must thank my colleague, Minister Garcia, One of the key activities within this strategic objective is the development of a comprehensive program focused on healthy schools, with an allocation of US $1.78 million. The construction of public outdoor gyms is a sub-activity under the Healthy Schools Initiative, and accordingly, a comprehensive assessment is being conducted to determine the potential locations and type of infrastructure, material, and technical requirements. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Supplemental question from Member Princestown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Honourable Minister, just for clarification, when you spoke about evidence-based strategies, can you indicate at this time whether or not they exist, especially in our primary schools, seeing that the data coming forward has indicated that there was an increase in children with diabetes, diagnosed with diabetes? Can you indicate if there's a program in terms of the evaluation and monitoring in the schools?
Sure. Thank you. Madam Speaker, when I answered the previous question, I did say that we completed an evaluation of school food options and a survey of body mass index in primary and secondary schools. Let me elaborate. We did an analysis of BMIs on 3,500 school children. That survey was completed in December of last year. And we hope to have the results, which I read out, by March of this year. That will give us the evidence and the baseline data to now move forward and measure the success of this program against a baseline figure. So the short answer to your question is yes, that BMI study of 3,500 school children will be the evidence to launch this program.
Question to Member Princestown.
Thank you, Madam. Honourable Minister, in light of your answer, could you indicate whether there's plans on behalf of the government through the Ministry of Health to have this testing done regularly in schools as part of an initiative going forward that would assist these children?
Sure. Yes, that's an excellent question. And the answer is yes, because when you get your baseline figure now, having tested 3,005, and you start to implement the programs and plans, for instance, physical activity, banning of sugary drinks, and other measures, you have to go back now and test again to see if you are actually achieving your objectives. So the answer is yes, they will have to be periodic, may not be the full cohort of 3,005, but you will have to do samples now to see whether you are meeting your objectives. So the short answer is yes.
Member for Old Pooch West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 80 to the Minister of Public Utilities.
Minister of Public Utilities.
Madam Speaker, the Water and Sewage Authority completed leak repairs work on the Beetham sewer line on Thursday, the 18th of January, 2018. The initial overflow was due to debris and trash being thrown into the sewer main. Subsequently, there was a collapse of the existing 9-inch concrete sewer main. Madam Speaker, once a complaint is received, a work request is generated and dispatched to the relevant department within WASA, which investigates and undertakes the repair work. In the case of the sewer leaks, it is dispatched to the authority's wastewater department. The authority has a job management system which is used to manage and monitor all repairs and maintenance work. Thank you.
Supplemental member for
no, sorry.
Member for Barataria, Sanwa.
Question number 85. The Minister of Finance on behalf of the member.
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The quantum of US dollars used to pay credit card owings for each month in 2017 were as follows. In January, the sale of foreign exchange to credit card centers was $108.5 million US, January 2017. February 2017, the credit card usage of Forex, $70.5 million US. In March 2017, $94.1 million US. In April 2017, $68.3 million US. May 2017, $100.5 million US used in credit card purchases. June 2017, $90.4 million US. July 2017, $101.6 million US. August 2017, $98 million US. September 2017, $120.4 million US. October 2017, $107.4 million US used by credit card owners to purchase Forex. November 2017, $148 million US. December 2017, $96.8 million US. For a grand total for 2017, in terms of the quantum of US dollars used to pay credit card owings for that year, $1,204.5 US. And the answer to part B, sorry, Madam Speaker, the quantum of US dollars used to buffer the Trinidad and Tobago dollar to the US dollar exchange rate for each month in 2017 were as follows. For January 2017, the central bank injected $175 million US of the government's foreign exchange. In February 2017, central bank injected $175 million US. March 2017, the central bank injected $175 million US. In April 2017, the central bank injected $150 million US, the government's foreign exchange. May 2017, $135 million US. June 2017, $140 million US. July 2017, central bank injected $175 million US of the government's foreign exchange. In August 2017, $150 million US. September 2017, $156 million US. October 2017, $125 million US. November 2017, $155 million US. December 2017, $105 million US, making the total quantum of US dollars used to buffer the Trinidad and Tobago dollar to the US dollar exchange rate for the year 2017, $1,816 million US.
Member for Kamutu Mansinala.
Thank you. Question number 88 to the Minister of Education.
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, the answer, yes. The funds and payment of grants to the 5 Presbyterian secondary schools are up to date. Thank you.
Supplemental, member for Kamutu Mansinala.
Can the Honourable Minister give the exact dates that the funds were paid and how much they were in the amount of? Thank you.
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, I can tell this House that the funds were made available to the schools on the 24th of January 2018. In terms of the quantum, I am not in a position at this point to state. Thank you.
Member for Kamutu Mansinala.
Thank you. Question number 89 to the Minister of Social Development and Family Services.
Minister of Social Development and Family Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the management of the Arangwe Social Welfare Local Board was not instructed to close the office at 2:45 p.m. to facilitate the early departure of staff. The Ministry's Social Welfare Local Board offices located throughout Trinidad and Tobago are open to service the public daily between the hours of 8 and 4:15 p.m. from Monday to Thursday and from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Friday. These are the established and standard office hours consistent with government's policy. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Supplemental question, member for Kamutu Mansinala.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister indicate what transpired on that particular data to cause the office to be closed at that time?
Member for Kamutu Mansinala. I will not allow that question. There's no particular date. Member for Kamuto Mansinala.
Question, thank you. Question number 90 to the Minister of Social Development and Family Services.
Minister of Social Development and Family Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the staff complement at the Sandy Grande Social Welfare Local Board is 15. There are 7 vacancies with bodies. These are Social Welfare Advisor 1, 2 positions, Clerk 2, 1 position, Clerk 1, 2 positions, and Social Welfare Field Officer 2 positions. The Service Commissions Department is charged with the responsibility for recruiting and selecting persons to fill the Social Welfare Advisor 1, Clerk 2, and Clerk 1 positions. The Ministry of Social Development and Family Services is responsible for the recruitment and selection of social welfare field officers and have advertised the positions. The ministry is working to have these positions filled soonest. There are 4 OJTs assigned to the Sandy Grande office. As part of their training, they assist with clerical duties. The OJTs are not normally required to provide direct service to the public. In addition, Madam Speaker, the ministry is not aware of any reports of members of the public being denied service by staff of the Sandy Grande Local Board. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Request for leave to move the adjournment of the House on definite matters of urgent public importance, statements by ministers, personal explanations, introduction of bills, motions relating to the business or sittings of the House and moved by a minister, public business, committee business, motions.
Honorable members, the debate on the following motion, which was in progress when the House adjourned on Friday, February 2nd, 2018, will be resumed. Be it resolved that this House adopt the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Insurance Bill 2016. The members who have already spoken are as follows: Honorable Colum Ember, MP, Dr. Suruj Ratan Rambachan, MP. Member for San Fernando West.
Madam Speaker, we are on the 16th of February 2018, and we are proposing in this motion the adoption of the work of the 4th Joint Select Committee to sit on the insurance bill. To put it into context and to dive to a few material observations in the bill as proposed by the work of the Joint Select Committee, I wish to state that we are in fact today presented with an opportunity to complete work which began immediately after the inception of the 1980 Insurance Act. That law is now 38 years old, Madam Speaker. It has been through 9 amendments throughout the years between 1980 to today's date. If this motion passes today and we adopt the work of the Joint Select Committee, we will be effectively repealing and replacing law which is now 38 years old. At the time of the introduction of the Insurance Act itself in 1980, Trinidad and Tobago was presented with an opportunity for regulation of a very important sector. In fact, it is a sector which the Minister of Finance has already put on the table is well above 27% of our GDP in terms of the size of the sector. But back then in 1980, the world was a much simpler place. Corporate governance was a simpler place. The products which were packaged in terms of market products was a simpler environment. We have seen in the period 1980 to 2018 a development of complex structures, a development of complex arrangements from an industry perspective. And indeed, the market development of products has far outstripped the manner in which we regulate it. In Trinidad and Tobago, under the Insurance Act, we have laws that coordinate with each other. And it's very important to remember that the Insurance Act, as it stands and as is proposed to be repealed and replaced, is intended to work in a financial system where there are other laws in operation. In particular, the securities industries laws have to be factored into this. The insolvency laws have to be factored. The Companies Act must be factored. The Financial Institutions Act must be factored. The financial obligation regulations must be factored. And this is coming in a time when we are under a global matrix of operation. Because it's true to say that our insurance companies, having mind and management, having market share participation in other jurisdictions, having insurance products meet us from other jurisdictions, in particular under white labeling mechanisms or under fronting arrangements, as is referred to in the insurance industry, where risk is largely on the outer side of the territory rather than on the inner side of the territory, sometimes as much as 100%. In that kind of environment, the global management of risk, as it relates to money laundering and financing of terrorism, and how international agencies view us, is very important in considering the state and condition of our law. I will add for the record that the Financial Action Task Force, the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force, the European Council, the Global Forum, have all, in fact, regulated their respective country participant jurisdictions and, in fact, have made observations about our financial sector, including the insurance sector. The work before us now is material to advance the positive reflections that other jurisdictions have of us. Now, very often, my learned friend from Caroni Central often says we must decide upon our originality and our territoriality and our jurisdiction. And it's true that we ought not to be seconding our jurisdiction and autonomy to foreign jurisdictions, but our financial services market, our financial sector, our economy depends upon how we are treated by other jurisdictions in terms of positive or negative reflections. This insurance bill is one which improves the state and condition of the Insurance Act from the 1980 Act. It takes account of the sophistication of the market, sophistication of the products. It is one which materially stands upon reflections which we as a country have learned through litigation and through market collapse. We are all well aware of how the market was affected, first beginning with the mortgage collapse in the United States in the period 2007-2008, and then moving in terms of a backflow arrangement into the market collapse which occurred in 2008-2009 and the effect that it had on the CLICO group as a whole. Indeed, the amendments in 2008-2009 to the Insurance Act, to the Central Bank Act, to allow for regulatory provisions, etc., were important steps towards the stabilization of the market flows. But suffice it to say, I think the easy point to agree upon is that the capital adequacy arrangements for insurance companies left a lot to be desired. Capital adequacy standing at $1 million for your whole capital, or $3 million for your whole capital, $1 million for general insurance, and $3 million for life insurance. To say that your capital at $1 million and your capital at $3 million is enough to back your liabilities in the event of a failure of product is certainly to say that that is unacceptable. It is a joke, as my learned colleague across the floor said. It really and truly is. And that's what I meant by the market sophistication in terms of the movement of how we view risk, particularly where there are complex products on the market. This particular bill proposes for an improvement on capital adequacy considerations and to move to risk management. And that risk management is a careful introduction because there was a great deal of consultation as to how the industry ought to improve itself. And we're moving the general life insurance and the motor vehicle insurance, general company insurance and life insurance considerations to a much higher marker, as high as 25 million. But very importantly, we are making sure that that capital at 25 million has room for adjustment. So unlike the previous act, which sat with static capital adequacy of 1 million and 3 million, this variable risk capital, with formulas included in the bill that say if your capital adequacy is deemed to be in risk, if you fall below 70%, if the independent auditors and independent assessors of the company consider that the capital is no longer required, that there can be adjustment by way of recommendation from the regulator. And this, of course, redounds, as I know my learned colleague from Tabakit has really focused upon, to the interest of policyholders. Now, there is an important position to bear in mind here, because the fiduciary responsibility of an insurer, an insurance company, and market actors in that field towards policyholders is being treated with differently in this bill. This bill does not propose, if I can call it, the lesser standard of fiduciary responsibility that directors and other officers have in respect of companies, be it under Section 99 of the Companies Act or otherwise. It in fact takes it to a level higher. And that higher level is by way of certification inside of the bill in respect of corporate governance and independent criteria. But permit me, Madam Speaker, to say this. I've had the great pleasure of participating on all of the Joint Select Committees over the last 8 years, every last one of them, beginning in 2011 with the Insurance Bill 2011, the Insurance Bill 2013, the Insurance Bill number 2 of 2013, then with the Insurance Bill 2015, and the Insurance Bill 2016 as it was carried over into this session of Parliament. So certainly for the last 7 years, I consider it a great privilege to have been a legislator and an attorney at law in both circumstances, both hats, participating in the work of this. I've also had, and I wish to express my gratitude for being allowed into the work whilst as an opposition senator and then as Attorney General, I've also had the pleasure of practicing a lot in the arena. Indeed, also engaged in a significant amount of litigation post the collapse of CLICO and understanding where the inefficiencies in our system lie. Madam Speaker, in 2015, in May 2015, we came to the Parliament, the last government, and a Joint Select Committee's work product was brought forward. We have had Minister of Finance Dukaran bring forward the Insurance Bill 2011. We had Minister of Finance Hawaii bring forward the 2013 number 1, 2013 number 2, and 2015 bills. And we've had Minister of Finance Imbert, member for Diego Martin Northeast, bring forward the 2016 iteration as it's been carried over. And one may ask, what has taken this country and this Parliament so long? And I want to answer that question squarely. The work is so radical a piece of work in improving the product that we had to ensure that there was adequate stakeholder consultation. And that stakeholder consultation is not only the market actors of insurance companies, be it ATIC or insurance brokers, but that also the regulators were consulted, the central bank, the Securities and Exchange Control, and international entities that coordinate with us, including the regulatory environment from an overseas perspective and regulatory assessors if one wants to consider CFATF or FATF or Global Forum or the EU in that dynamic. And that work of the Joint Select Committees, all 5 of them, all 4 of them, that work actually involved, to date, 24 meetings, 10 of them under Minister Imbert and 14 of them under Ministers Hawaii and Dukaran. And the difference between the 2015 product in May 2015 and the product today in 2017, I wish to point out, is actually set out in written detail in this report, and the report is here for consideration, at page 35 and continuing onward, where we have taken the matrix of all of these submissions and lined them up side by side. Whilst I sat as an opposition senator in May 2015, I was not able to support the 2015 bill. In fact, when the vote was taken, there were 23 members for the bill passage, the bill's passage. There were no voices against, but there were 4 in abstention, and I was 1 in abstention. And I wish to put on the record now why we have moved from a position of support, of lack of support by way of abstention in the Senate on the 26th of May 2015 to one of support. And it is to be found in the amendments which the JSC of 2016 and 2017 has proposed, beginning at pages 35 onward at the report. And, Madam Speaker, they concern, I would say, two very important issues. The two large issues are one to be found in the allegation of excessive criminalization, and two to be found in the market consideration of the Lloyd's market itself as an actor which has significant bearing in the Caribbean basin in particular and in Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, a third issue can be added, but it really is the generalized issue to the need to make sure that the provisions in the 2015 bill matched up with the recommendations of the third Joint Select Committee, which we did in 2014. And let me explain that. In 2015, in May 2015, when Minister Hawaii came as Minister of Finance to the Senate, the work of the Joint Select Committee was not completed because the Joint Select Committee was denied the opportunity to match up the amendments which were made in the work of the fourth Joint Select Committee, the third Joint Select Committee versus the final product. And we could not match up clause by clause each of the amendments which were made when we sat as a committee of that Joint Select Committee. I'm very pleased to say, as this report will demonstrate, that every last one of the clauses have now been set out in detail, demonstrating where the amendments have been made. And in particular, we've had the opportunity to go back to all of the stakeholders and have the buy-in and consensus of the stakeholders that these clauses now match the view of the collective whole. The work of that Joint Select Committee continuum was definitely a work which was improved by the participation, and I wish to put it on the record with extreme gratitude on behalf of us all as a parliament, of the consultants which worked with the Joint Select Committee in the persons of Dr. Claude Denbo of Senior Counsel, who served as a legal consultant to the committee, Mr. Rodney Lester, who is an international insurance consultant, Mr. John Gonzalez, who is a local insurance consultant, and Mr. Hugh Masley, who is again a local insurance consultant. And that concerned the work of the Joint Select Committee in the period December 2013 to June 2014, and then thereafter as up to May 2015. I wish to also express sincere gratitude to the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Trinidad and Tobago, ICAT, to the Insurance Brokers Association of Trinidad and Tobago, IBAT, to the Maritime Life Caribbean Limited, to the Banking Insurance and General Workers Union, to the Pan American Life Insurance Company. And I would also like, for the record, to thank every member of the Joint Select Committees that served in the period 2011 to 2016. And I mean that with utmost sincerity. I am on record in May 2015 as having thanked Minister Hawaii then for the extent of work and dedication that he offered to the committee in the period of time that he did, and I thank profusely the member for Diego Martin Northeast, the Honorable Colum Imbert, Minister of Finance, for the dedicated work that he engaged in as the chair of the Joint Select Committee in producing this final work product. I turn, Madam Speaker, before I get to the two large issues of Lloyd's and excessive criminalization, to just confirm for the benefit of the listening public through you that the bill centers upon enhanced corporate governance, as I've indicated in passing previously. It imposes prudential requirements and accounting requirements, which redound to the benefit of policyholders in particular. It provides for the protection of policyholders. It allows for the institution of continuous training requirements for the professionals within the market sector, and it imposes stricter penalties. But very importantly, Madam Speaker, what the bill has now is the benefit of an entire package. The bill is a bill with 282 clauses, 13 parts. It has several schedules attached to it. But very importantly, it's not so much the work of the schedules that I want to focus upon. The bill has the benefit of complete draft regulations. And there are 11 regulations which stand out. So we are now talking about a whole package and not just an insurance act with subsidiary legislation to come after. And importantly, and for the record, apart from the 12 schedules that we have, the 11 regulations are as follows, and they will follow immediately upon this particular bill. The Central Bank Payment of Supervisory Fees and Charges Amendment Regulations, the Insurance Intermediary Registration Regulations, the Insurance Capital Adequacy Regulations, the Insurance Caribbean Policy Premium Method Regulations, the Insurance Financial Condition Report for General Insurance Regulations, the Insurance Financial Condition Report for Long-Term Insurance Regulations, the Insurance Participating Account Regulations, the Insurance Companies Registration Regulations, the Insurance Pension Fund Plans Registration Fees Regulations, the Insurance Pension Fund Plans Investment Regulations, and the Insurance Approved Securities Regulations. And what we have, therefore, apart from the insurance bill that this report has now brought forward, is we have all of these 11 regulations, meaning that we have an entire package. We also propose, and it's included by way of consequential amendments to the Proceeds of Crime Act in particular, we have the ability, Madam Speaker, to consider the interaction with the other laws that work alongside this. So this is a complete package. As we treat with prudential management, permit me just, it's impossible if one were to divide time out to treat with 282 clauses in 45 minutes to treat with the clauses. It means that you would have seconds to deal with each clause. But under prudential measures, we have already touched the need for the removal of the statutory fund. We are moving towards the introduction of a risk-based capital regime. As I've indicated earlier, it involves a grandfathering of the provisions, allowing for the implementation of incremental increases until you've reached the capital muster that is required. Very importantly, we have standardized actuarial validation methodology, and that is actually found in the regulations that I've just referred to. And we've dealt with a stress testing regime for insurers, again the subject of the regulations that I've referred to. And we have furthered that by including what we call large credit exposures. Suffice it to say, this basic philosophy is that the entities would be continuously stress tested. The supervisory regulation that comes by way of the central bank's involvement and the Inspector of Financial Institutions' role as the regulator under this regime involves a continuous testing on a constant basis throughout the year and through interval periods to make sure that risk matches value. Because this country cannot allow policyholders to be exposed in the fashion that they were previously. As I mentioned a little earlier, we're treating with strengthening of corporate governance. We're dealing with a very large mischief which obviously reared its head in the financial collapses seen globally and also in Trinidad and Tobago. We're treating with how consolidated supervision is to work, where there are companies which engage in multiple ends of business. We're dealing with audit requirements. We're ensuring that there's an independent involvement of directors at the audit committee, must be chaired by an independent director, and we're allowing for external audit function and annual audit. The liability of auditors is also squarely anchored in this bill, to be found in clauses 70 onward, and in the consolidated supervision being found and audit requirements in 68, 75, and 77. But we're appointing actuaries, and we're dealing, Madam Speaker, with another very important provision which also finds itself in the securities legislation, and that is protection for whistleblowers. We are allowing for, in clauses 80 and 81, for former auditors and also an inspector to engage in whistleblowing with certain immunities, Madam Speaker, so that you don't only hang your hat upon the regulatory environment and stress testing and prudential management criterion, but that you are allowing for the independent whistleblowers to step forward with immunity. And we have parity for that inside of the securities legislation, of course. We're treating with duties of directors, and as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we have raised the ante. We are not relying upon the Companies Act fiduciary responsibilities. We're treating with the class of beneficial and fiduciary obligations to be a higher standard, and that higher standard is contained in the bill itself. We're allowing, very importantly, for corrective action. And there is a feature to be found in Schedule 6 of the bill, which finds itself anchored here, because the bill has adopted a similar approach again to securities industries, where we allow for the regulator to impose administrative sanctions, as well as directions, as well as the application of consideration of offenses, Madam Speaker. So there's a menu to be found across the bill, which goes from administrative imposition by the regulator of fines straight down to serious offenses, Madam Speaker. When we treat further with the issue of involvement and obligation, we are allowing, Madam Speaker, at clauses 93 to 109, a very important core concept, and that is for judicial management, suspension, and winding up. And I want to stress this. The concept of judicial management is one which has definitely evolved as one of the definite takeouts from the management of the CLICO issue. And that judicial management, suspension, and winding up function, Madam Speaker, is something that allows for a menu of options in the event that companies find themselves in collapse or otherwise. Madam Speaker, we have a very important provision which I know the member for Tabakeet was very passionate about in the Joint Select Committee, and that's consumer protection. In the consumer protection, and this is for the benefit of the listening public, we are providing that judgment claims must be settled within 40 days of the judgment order, unless there's a stay of execution. That's at clause 267. We're allowing for intermediaries who are required to create separate trust accounts for consumer funds to eliminate commingling of funds. We're allowing that upon winding up of an insurance company, the liabilities of an insurer to claimants on policies take precedence over unsecured creditors. Let me repeat that. We're allowing for a ranking of priorities for persons who are the victims on winding up to no longer be left pari passu or on equal level with unsecured creditors, but to have a preferential ranking in that. We're allowing that an insurer must issue a policy within 20 days of acceptance of the risk, to be found in clause 268. And importantly, with respect to fraud on policy holders, let me repeat this, with respect to fraud on policy holders, we have applied the most severe penalty to be found on the bill, and that is $10 million and 10 years imprisonment, to be found in clause 255. Madam Speaker, I'll treat with excessive criminalization as it flows from that, and then go to my last point, which will be on the Lloyd's market and one of the material differences between the 2015 bill, which came in May 2015, and the bill now before us. And on the point of excessive criminalization, I wish to thank in particular the submissions coming from Ed Fitzgerald, Queen's Counsel, who brought submissions on behalf of the Maritime Group, and for the reflections which were brought then. The 2015 bill brought by the last government had everything ranked on summary offenses. And those summary offenses were viewed to be the preferred route, because obviously a summary offense is dealt with at the magisterial level and does not involve the long, tortuous passage through a preliminary inquiry whilst it stands part of the laws and is soon to be abolished. But nonetheless, Madam Speaker, the argument that $10 million and 10 years on summary conviction could betray the nature of a summary offense and be seen to be grossly disproportionate to the nature of summary offences was a relevant consideration for the Joint Select Committee. And accordingly, Madam Speaker, we specifically sought to amend the offences at clauses 24, 65, 77, 101, 131, 144, and 254. And what we have done in the iteration of the bill before us now, the work of this government's Joint Select Committee, is we have categorized offences as summary offences, hybrid offences, and indictable offences, therefore avoiding risk that on challenge to the excessiveness or disproportionality or lack of proportionality of the offences, that there could be some degree of effect to the legislation. So we've taken caution and we have avoided the argument of excessive criminalization and preserved the three categories of offences in those particular clauses. Madam Speaker, we have also allowed for strict liability offences. And I want to point to one clause in particular, which is clause 254, which is the general provisions offence clause. In clause 254, that is the clause which treats with wherever an offence is committed, but the penalty is not prescribed. And whilst we have had the concept of strict liability offences as part of the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, I want to point out to the fact that there is a defence that is included in the general clause. And again, that defence which was included was added so that we would avoid an argument of lack of proportionality and therefore lack of constitutionality in the offence provision. And we have allowed it for a defence to say that a person under charge can prove that all reasonable precautions had been taken and due diligence had been exercised to avoid the commission of the offence. And that's a very important clause, Madam Speaker, because it adds to the proportionality of the offences which we now prescribe for consideration by honourable members of this House. Madam Speaker, in dealing again with proportionality and in dealing with offences, I will just wrap up that particular subsection by saying that Schedule 6 of the bill proposes the administrative fines, and those administrative fines are not only set out in a user-friendly fashion, so that those who have to apply the law or consider the law to regulate themselves or be regulated have an easy understanding of what they will be subjected to, rather than a piecemeal approach which presented itself in other iterations of the law. Madam Speaker, I'll turn to my final observation. And my final observation treats with the issue of the Lloyd's market. In May 2015, the 26th of May 2015, I sat in the Senate, and I pointed out to the Honourable.
Are now spent. You're entitled to 15 more minutes if you wish to.
Should you please? Thank you. Yes, Madam Speaker. On the 26th of May 2015, I sat opposite in opposition and I cautioned the Minister of Finance that we were on very thin ground in terms of the viability of our market and our insurance providers. And I warned Minister Hawaii, as a result of which we abstained from supporting on that bill. We warned Minister Hawaii in strict terms that the Lloyd's market share was going to be put at risk. In fact, Madam Speaker, as it was, 26th of May 2015, Lloyd's actually wrote to Minister Hawaii on the 3rd of June 2015. And in their letter to Minister Hawaii, they put on the record an expression of deep concern as to the accelerated movement of this bill in light of the Lloyd's issue. And they put on the record that in 2014, and I'll just use the position then, that the Lloyd's market wrote $347.6 million of net premium in Trinidad and Tobago, and that the gross premium was $445.2 million. Let me put that simply. $500 million worth of market gross premium written by the Lloyd's grouping, which is the Lloyd's market itself, was being put at risk in the 2015 bill. But there was an extreme haste to pass through the bill in the Senate then. Lloyd's wrote on the 3rd of June 2015 to express, number one, that the bill did not consider what Lloyd's was. So what is Lloyd's, Madam Speaker? Lloyd's is a market arrangement. Lloyd's is to be considered separately from the Lloyd's Society. Lloyd's Society has been regulated since 1870s, comes straight up by Acts of Parliament in the United Kingdom. But the Lloyd's market operates in a syndicated version. And that syndicated version is to say that members that take the cover, I have an insurance product, I need 100% cover. The Lloyd's market operation says that the individual participant members can take pieces of the arrangement. In other words, then they can syndicate themselves to cover the 100% risk by taking smaller risk amounts. And in Lloyd's, the market considerations proposed by the 2015 bill required Lloyd's to put 120% coverage for their risk. So every other insurance company in Trinidad and Tobago, under the law in the 2015 bill, was going to have 20% risk coverage, but Lloyd's was being required to take 120% risk coverage. In other words, Madam Speaker, the Lloyd's market would have been fatally collapsed as a result of the 2015 bill. And that fatal collapse is $500 million worth of net coverage, but for policyholders in Trinidad and Tobago, it means that the insurance product becomes massively more expensive. Let me put on the record, as a private practitioner, when I was in that position, covering professional indemnity insurance for $20 or $40 million, as I was required to do, in the type of work that I engage in the corporate commercial sector. The Lloyd's market provided me, as a private practitioner, with almost a 75% cheaper product than the local market did. Let me repeat that. 75% cheaper product than the local market did. And therefore, it would have been a gross dereliction of duty to have allowed for the Lloyd's market to have collapsed in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm very pleased to say, Madam Speaker, that you will find in our bill an improvement on the Lloyd's market. Specifically, it is clause 223 of the bill, 233 of the bill, where we are now providing that the Lloyd's market would be in line with the local market, which is 20% of stated capital of the classes on insurance business it intends to carry out, plus an amount equivalent to cover all policyholder liabilities. And Madam Speaker, if only for the benefit of policyholders and the commercial realities of our country, I'm very pleased to see this amendment in the bill. It would not have been a proper course to have allowed for that half-baked product or nearly finished product to have come to light. We, in the period of time that we engage in this Joint Select Committee, as I've demonstrated, have treated with 282 clauses, 13 parts, 11 regulations to operationalize this law. So we have, in our 2.5 years, managed to complete a massive work product, Madam Speaker, for the benefit of prudential management, corporate risking, risk assessment, market considerations, policyholder protection, and satisfaction in respect of the legal considerations of excessive criminality and proportionality and the manner in which the system shall operate. I am extremely pleased, and I say thank you to the Honourable Prime Minister for allowing me the privilege to sit in on the 24 meetings in the period 2011 to 2018 that we engaged in this work, to have sat on 4 Joint Select Committees, to have had the privilege of being a practitioner with the ability to make the law. I wish to express my deep gratitude to the technocrats who worked on this team. And I want to single out the CPC's department, Ms. Lorraine John, for the work that she did. I want to single out the Ministry of Finance Division, Treasury Solicitor. I want to single out Securities and Exchange Commission. I want to single out Stock Market. I want to thank the parliamentary staff for the excellent work that they have done and diligence in supervising us. Most importantly, Madam Speaker, to the humble people that sit in the Hansard, I want to express my profound gratitude to the Hansard. Madam Speaker, that division of beautiful, hard-working people sit quietly, record every word that we say, all submissions made in committee, in the House, on the floor, and they are never thanked as profusely as they deserve to be thanked. And I wish to thank them from the bottom of our collective hearts for their continuous work for this product. I don't think that there's much more in terms of points of interest in the bill or otherwise that we could focus upon, and I urge honourable members to adopt this work so that we can begin the implementation of this law for the benefit of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and in particular the policyholders. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I have no quarrel either with the presentation of the Minister of Finance, nor the contribution of the Attorney General, as I rise to make a contribution to the debate on the Insurance 2016 bill. Given the history of this bill, and the Attorney General outlined some of the issues and the processes involved, it should easily receive bipartisan support. But that does not mean, notwithstanding the positions taken by the Attorney General, that there are not issues that need to be raised and to be flagged, and I'll take the opportunity to raise some. Since 2011, attempts have been made to pass this bill, as the Attorney General pointed out, and I think the Minister of Finance as well. It was actually passed in the Senate in May 2015, but it lapsed in the House of Representatives, as indeed it had lapsed several times before. It is possible to argue that this should not have happened given the global financial crisis and the local crisis with CLICO here in 2009. But for a number of reasons, it did happen, and the reality is that this matter remains to be fixed. So what we are doing here is fixing a matter that has been with us for some time. This bill received the attention and scrutiny of a Joint Select Committee on 3 occasions. I served on one of those Joint Select committees under the chairmanship of then Minister of Finance, Hawaii. Each Joint Select Committee had consultations with stakeholders. Each Joint Select Committee had expert advice at its disposal. The latest Joint Select Committee report to this Parliament, which consists of about 296 pages in addition to the agreed bill, all unanimously agreed, that is to say, all members of the committee agreed, government, opposition, and independent members. And they have sent this report, which is what we are examining. It is not difficult to support the bill because it originated with us, as the Attorney General, in fact, conceded. The last government under former Prime Minister, Mrs. Kamla Persad-Bissessar, as we wrestled with the 2009-2010 financial crisis in Trinidad and Tobago and globally. The financial crisis, which occurred at that time, was rooted in local realities, yes. But what happened here in 2009 was also globally connected to a larger crisis in banks and in insurance companies with ripple effect around the world. The rest of the world has already responded, and I think it is important to take note of that. Since 2008, 2009, the rest of the world has already responded. Our response is therefore a delayed response, and therefore we ought to have had the benefit of a learning opportunity. The processes that attend getting to this point have been consultative and stakeholders in both the public and private sectors have been taken into account. Their inputs have made a material difference, Madam Speaker. During the period of the People's Partnership Government, many stakeholders appeared. They submitted documents, they advocated, they sought to influence. In addition, expert advice on the subject of insurance regulation and issues related to these have been taken into account throughout the extended process, including this last report. Both international consultants and local experts were involved over the period. Hopefully, therefore, we have indeed learned something from all of this that will contribute to better legislation. I remember the many presentations and exchanges during the period in which I served, and I'm sure this had continued in the various iterations of the committee, which led to the final report. An important principle of continuity of governance across administrations has been followed in this instance. I take this opportunity to emphasize that the government on the other side of this House over the last 2.5 years has only selectively honored this principle. This principle of continuity in matters of national progress when administrations change. I wish to emphasize this point because it is an important point of governance. The government of the day, therefore, would do well to honor this principle in the public interest and in order to strengthen the credibility of the governance process in Trinidad and Tobago, and in order to boost confidence in a wary and skeptical population about the governance process in the country in general. Arbitrary governmental executions and actions, however justified by well-crafted articulations of propaganda, do not boost confidence when legitimate human and citizens' expectations are dashed. Whether this has to do with Cuba Hospital or the South Campus of the University of the West Indies, with shagaramas or with cane farmers, I will not elaborate on these now, but the government knows, stakeholders know, and the population knows. The Keith Rowley government has been arbitrary at best on the principle of continuity of governance. And in many instances, legal challenges have been necessary to bring them to their senses, and the ruling of the court has had to correct some of this arbitrariness. But what does this bill seek to do? First of all, it replaces the existing Insurance Act with this one, and the Attorney General talked about the time in which that act was established. He talked about it as a less complex, a less complicated time, and he talked about the fact that the entire market and the entire range of products had grown in sophistication over the 40 years or so that we are talking about between the last legislation and this one. So it replaces the old act, which will be repealed by the passage of this bill. So new legislation, Madam Speaker, with a new and more relevant framework for the national insurance industry is being established. This will provide for the regulation of the insurance industry, but the bill will also regulate pension fund plans that are outside of the jurisdiction of the state. That is to say, pension plans administered by private entities. So this particular bill is focused on insurance companies and pension funds, which is a $100 billion portfolio in Trinidad and Tobago, no small amount or proportion of the economy. So what this bill is seeking to do is to reform the existing system or regime within which the CLICO crisis of 2009 took place. It seeks to learn from that experience and to alter the conditions which may have contributed to the evolution of that particular crisis. So this is a bill of stronger regulation for the insurance industry on a company-by-company basis and on an industry-wide basis as well. Regulation of privately administered funds is also strengthened. Financial standards to which insurance companies will now have to adhere have also been raised and improved. Capital adequacy requirements have also been strengthened, which means more secure companies and greater comfort or security for customers. The objective here is to ensure that funds meant for policyholders who pay their money diligently each month or each year to protect themselves, their family, their property, their financial security. The objective here is to ensure that unnecessary risk is not taken by any company that would jeopardize these things for the policyholder. And as the AG pointed out, and as the bill makes clear, there are strong penalties for non-adherence and non-conformity with the requirements of the regulator and of the law. The same approach is taken for pension holdings, which ordinary citizens depend on for retirement. These are good things for the citizen. That is to say, the legislation and the protection that it offers. These are good things for the citizen, for the policyholder, for the contributor to pensions, and to the investor. Protection is therefore strengthened. Accountability for companies is highlighted by compliance requirements and hopefully strict enforcement. Because that is where we all fall down in this country. On implementation, on compliance, on enforcement. I emphasize enforcement because all the laws in the world would not work effectively if there is not enforcement based on diligent oversight. Because Trinidad and Tobago can often be a country of plenty talk, more legislation, and yet nothing is finally achieved. The main regulatory authority in this bill is the central bank, and I want to focus on that business of enforcement and regulatory application and the institution and the personages that are involved. The main regulatory authority is the central bank. In this bill, the central bank is given the power to regulate the insurance industry. It is given the power to do so company by company, but it also has broad oversight of the sector as well as specific authority over each company. Citizens may well ask, who will do this and how will this be done by the central bank? While in this bill it is the central bank that is responsible for preventative intervention, that is to say it can step in when things are going wrong and offer advice. It is responsible for corrective intervention, that is to say it can step in to tell a company what they must do if they are going wrong in certain areas and insist upon it. And that strengthens not just the nurturing side, but the regulatory side. And then there is protective intervention, intervening to close a company down if necessary, if it will not listen or do things right, if it is putting customers at risk, or if it is weakening or threatening to weaken the entire insurance sector or the financial system. These are strong powers given specifically in the central bank to the inspector. And I want to stress that. The inspector is a very powerful agent in this particular piece of legislation. These strong powers are given specifically to the inspector of the central bank. So it is not just the central bank as an institution that is the regulatory power. It is a specific office and ultimately a specific person holding that office. This is an important point that I take the opportunity to highlight, because many times in this country, those in authority are given power and jurisdictional authority without direct responsibility and without clear accountability being assigned to anyone. And it is important to know that while the central bank has jurisdiction over the financial sector, it is the inspector who has direct jurisdiction and the power to act in instances of concern or of breach. The inspector, therefore, is the institution and the person with the authority and the power, and therefore, that is the office and person who is responsible and accountable. This point needs to be reinforced because you cannot have nebulous authority in a situation such as this where you are seeking to regulate an industry where a crisis has taken place locally and globally. We can't have nebulous authority. We must be clear on who has authority and responsibility in order to get the job done. Another important consideration in this bill is that it is meant to align with international best practice and international benchmarks for the regulation, supervision, and management of the insurance companies and the insurance industry, that is to say the individual companies as well as the industry as a whole. This is done by aligning governance, supervisory, and regulatory requirements with core principles developed by the International Association of Insurance Supervisors, or IAIS, the international body which establishes the criteria for the best practice and standards of compliance. I hope that the government members opposite understand that when we comply with international norms and expectations, that it is not just to submit to a demand or to comply with a new directive of the 21st century G7 and G20 global financial governance order, which, among other things, seeks to keep big country strategies and interests intact. That must not be the approach to international compliance of a small country such as ours. When we engage the Financial Action Task Force, and the Attorney General referred to it, and other agencies, for instance, we must make our case as a small country in collaboration with other small countries in our region and elsewhere, there are many, to address local and regional challenges in the big global financial architecture with big country strategic alliances and interests. And we have an obligation to our citizens in whose name we are meant to speak, to carve out a space so that a country such as Trinidad and Tobago can still, in this very complex global environment, build a strong financial system, integrated and effectively connected with the global system, as well as to the good practices to which that system adheres. We must not, however, surrender our local or regional capacity to compete, to grow, and to expand regionally and internationally. International agreements are not meant to support small country underdevelopment or to engineer the marginalization of developing countries in the world system. I wonder if, for instance, the Washington lobbyists, which this government hired, I think without proper procurement practices in 2016 advises the government on some of these things. In countries such as Trinidad and Tobago, we must always be alert to the fact that foreign policy and international engagement are to support national development and national prosperity objectives, not just to tag along, go along, cower before big country insistence, and serve the interests of others while undermining others. So that in the story that the Attorney General told of Lloyd's and the framework within which they operated in Trinidad and Tobago, controlling over 50% of the market, the issue to be addressed there was really how do you get the best of what the international system has to offer? How do you create the conditions in which you do not nullify someone who has been critical to the growth, or an institution which has been critical to the growth and development of this country and the insurance industry here, both for insurance and reinsurance as well? But also, how do you create the conditions in Trinidad and Tobago and the region to grow a reinsurance industry? So one has to always be aware and alert of how the world is organized, how systems are fixed, how they are structured, and how you are in relation to that, and how you can make the space in between. We will not argue about the decisions that have been taken. This is reasonable legislation, and it is worth supporting. But I want to say that when we argue about these things, we must be alert to the fact that there are real issues concerned about development and underdevelopment, about marginalization and integration, that one has to take into account as you make decisions about how you relate to international systems that are extremely strong, very well organized, and dictated too by the powerful countries of the world. Now, this piece of legislation touches on 10 other pieces of legislation, including the Financial Institutions Act, Chapter 7909, and the Anti-Terrorism Act, which all link to international considerations and shared interests of a global community of nations. Yes, it does. But it is also linked by this legislation to big country power that call the shots. For instance, the FATCA legislation, which this Parliament has passed with full support of the opposition, and other legislation which we may have to pass to align with European concerns and standards, have already, in the case of FATCA, and will, in the case of similar new legislation, tie us into the global orbit of big country concerns and priorities. Not that the other key issues addressed, such as crime, which the Attorney General mentioned, such as corruption, which he mentioned, such as money laundering, which he mentioned, etc. Not that these are not taken into account by the international financial community and controlling interests. In fact, that is their main focus and primary selling point. But the big issue that they are most concerned about is how to create a global cartel of powerful financial interests in the industrialized world, which will set the terms of financial engagement globally and the generation of profits and taxes in these industrialized countries, which can have the effect of marginalizing developing countries, which focus on and these institutions are moving in the direction of focusing on high net worth customers, that is to say, the big banks and the financial players in the industrialized countries. And all of this that is taking place in the global financial system will make correspondent financial relationships tougher to establish, and only on the basis of compliance and conformity to rules made elsewhere. I say these things because we don't seem to be alert to the things that are happening in the world and our responsibility and right to raise these things in the global fora of the world and to make the necessary space to do that. If we do not represent our own interests in the world and simply act on the basis of what other people tell us to do in whatever fora we create, we are never going to have an influence on what the world system is. Now, the legislation that we pass here, therefore, and this is the main point that I'm making in this particular part of my presentation, Madam Speaker, the legislation that we pass here is important because when you pass legislation, no country can insist that we violate our own laws to comply with anything that they want us to comply with. That is what sovereignty as a principle allows. It is not a flag to be waved. It is an important principle in international relations. That is why this Parliament is so important. And that is why Parliament should not be anybody's playground. Not the executive, not a clique, not powerful local interests, not powerful international interests either. We must always remember that Parliament is about the people's business and about the public interest. The laws we make must reflect that. So in countries such as ours, we need to be clear on what our own interest is, and we must commit to serving that interest as best we can. If we fail in this, we may end up with total foreign ownership of our financial industry. This is a warning to the government of the day to take due care and to pay due attention. How does a small country align with international standards and good practice and still create conditions for homegrown industry and institutions to strengthen themselves to compete effectively and to grow internationally? It is an important consideration. It cannot be ignored. Let me summarize what I've been saying by underscoring 3 points. The method and process employed to get this piece of legislation to this stage, although perhaps too much delayed, is exemplary and worthy of support. I take this opportunity to congratulate all members of the last Joint Select Committee on this matter, which resulted in the report that we are debating today. Secondly, the strengthening of regulatory, supervisory, and accountability requirements included in this bill are most desirable and will enhance the strength and competitiveness of the sector, as well as make more secure the ordinary customer and citizen. Thirdly, as we seek to rise to international standards and meet international benchmarks, we must be careful to serve our national interest first and foremost, and our opportunities for international access, connectivity, and opportunity, and insist on the right to develop our own industry beyond our limited market. I note that the 3/5 majority requirement has been acknowledged in this piece of legislation because the bill violates sections 4 and 5 of the Constitution. That is the way that it should be done. That is not always the way the government on the other side does it. I have noticed that those pieces of legislation, Madam Speaker, which require conformity to international standards, conformity to international criteria and practice. The members opposite are prepared to collaborate with and to engage the opposition, as in this bill, as in the FATCA legislation, for instance, as in the Gaming and Betting Control Bill. But for bills which increase ministerial control, strengthen executive power, and reinforce authoritarian tendencies, the 3/5 majority rule is often dispensed with, even when it clearly violates Section 4 and 5 of the Constitution. I refer to bills such as the Strategic Services Agency Amendment Bill, the Plea Bargaining Bill come to mind. I think it is important to record my point of view on this matter in Hansard, since an examination of the government record will reveal a consistent pattern in this regard. The constitutionally required 3/5 majority rule is only arbitrarily and conveniently observed by this government over the time that we have been in Parliament together.
Honourable Member for Carney Central, your original speaking time is now spent. You're entitled to 15 more minutes if you wish. You may proceed.
I'd be grateful. I move on now to a few specific issues worthy of note in this bill. On page 13 of this bill, you have a very extensive explanation, first of all, of financial entity and the financial group. And I think that kind of refers to it reinforces the fact of the scope of this bill and what it is seeking to do. Then you have a broad, very broad definition, as I said, of financial entity. On page 29, clause 7, 1, and 2, it reinforces the role of the central bank on this inspector. And this is why I emphasize the role of the inspector, Madam Speaker. On the issue of the inspector, there are 6 full pages and 3 extensive clauses which cover the powers of the inspector. It is important to point out that this inspector has oversight over the entire financial sector, not just insurance, and is the person who seeks compliance to required standards for all entities in the sector. This critical question, therefore, is whether the central bank, which has jurisdiction, responsibility, and authority over the financial sector, and the inspector, housed in the central bank, who has direct jurisdiction, clear responsibility, and specific authority over the insurance sector, insurance companies, banks, banking sector. The critical question, given the coverage over these institutions, is whether the central bank and the inspectorate have the resources, the competencies, and capacity commensurate with the regulatory role assigned to them by this bill, which seeks to avert crisis in the future in a world growing more and more complex every day. That is the most fundamental of questions, and it requires a clear and unequivocal answer from the government. And I wish the Minister of Finance would help us with this when he speaks. Who is the inspector, for instance? When was he or she appointed? What is the size of the inspectorate? Have the competence levels required, the spread of duties, functions, and positions to be filled? Have they been, in fact, been filled? The infrastructure of support required to carry on effectively, have all of these issues been addressed? The bill does not address this issue in the substance of the bill, and I don't think that is the purpose of the bill, because that is to be dealt with by the institution. But this business of enforcement, of regulatory capacity, of being able to monitor and have oversight over and to intervene, this is the peg on which this entire piece of legislation hangs. And therefore the institution, both the inspectorate and the central bank's capacity are critical in making sure that this legislation works. The central bank has control over who is fit and proper, which company or individual can engage in a range of insurance businesses, and where a company can conduct business and can interfere with a company's conduct of business, as I mentioned before. Under this law, if you are in the insurance business, this is the only business you can conduct unless you get permission, and that is a good thing. There's a catastrophe reserve requirement. That is also important, and this is on page 74. But there's a problematic issue, because although this cannot be in the legislation, what an insurance company in the instrument that is signed between the customer and the insurance company, what is defined as catastrophe may well determine whether an insured person is paid in the case of an earthquake or a flood or some other not nice happening that may occur, and many things are so unpredictable in these days. For instance, if you were next to the mud volcano and something happened to your home, how would you be protected by something like that, and would these things be taken into account? Insurance consultants and insurance brokers as intermediaries are also taken into account in this bill. Now, given the broad range of things that I mentioned, the banks, the insurance companies, big insurance companies, small insurance companies, brokers, are all of these things, can the central bank and the inspectorate, do they have the capacity to deal with these things? And as I said, I'd be grateful for a response from the Minister of Finance. Notwithstanding these issues that I've raised, Madam Speaker, there are several positive and progressive actions taken in this bill. As I said, we contributed to it, and the bill has improved over time through the committees. The statutory fund has been replaced by more risk-based capital guidelines and has been increased from $3 to $15 million. Issues such as related party transactions and the overreach of insurance companies into other industries have also been addressed. There are yet, however, other issues of concern. The Minister of Finance, in his introduction to this bill, said that the insurance and pensions industry was a $100 billion industry. That is a significant proportion of the economy. If we are going to supervise and regulate this industry, we have to be careful about how we do it. Does the bill make enough of a distinction between small and large companies in the insurance industry, and consequently stronger oversight over the bigger companies that, in the case of difficulty, can present a systemic risk, not just a business risk, because that is what happened in the CLICO situation. It was not just a business risk. It was a systemic risk. Does the central bank have the resident competencies, and what steps are being taken to secure them? Who is the inspector of financial institutions? How big and strong is the inspectorate? Does he or she have actuarial support? Does he or she have support of a pension specialist to deal with the pensions issue? These are important questions which need to be answered if we wish to make an honest attempt to address the context which gave rise to the need for this bill. One cannot be dominantly political or irresponsibly partisan in a matter such as this, which strikes at the heart of a billion-dollar industry and which determines whether it is strong or weak and whether customers are in fact protected. What we don't need is a veneer of protection for the customer until the day of reckoning comes and we find out that it's just a veneer. In 2008-2009, we had a global financial crisis based on derivatives linked to mortgages for homes and other real estate, and driven by the demand of sovereign wealth funds and other large investors in the international financial market for higher returns on their investment. This led to a crash of some major banks, insurance companies, financial institutions, and corporations. Bailouts became necessary because jobs were threatened, the collapse of companies was imminent, economic sustainability was being jeopardized, financial instability was a reality, confidence was being undermined, and fear was rising. Finance then affected real estate, which collapsed, and low energy prices, which prevailed at the time, affected on energy-producing states like our own. Whatever the issues of governance, mismanagement, high risk-taking, overreaching, overborrowing, may be of legitimate concern in looking at the 2009 CLICO collapse in Trinidad and Tobago. CLICO and CL Financial received a triple whammy in 2009. The global downturn in finance, in real estate, and in energy hit them very hard. And that company had no breathing room because they were invested in three falling and fallen sectors, and they were overborrowed. There was no way they could have come out of it. That put ordinary investors at risk and put the financial system in Trinidad and Tobago at risk. Because like AIG in the US, CLICO was big here and connected to Republic Bank and many financial players. So this bill must be wise in learning from what the world has already done and is doing, having experienced the global financial crisis of 2009 and having learned from it, but we must also learn from what happened here. Let us hope that this bill is adequate. We cannot really know. It is a good attempt. It may be adequate, it may not be. Every day, as the AG mentioned, the world is increasing in complexity. I don't know, for instance, if a $15 million reserve fund would make a difference, would have made a difference to the fortunes of CLICO in 2009. A country like Canada was largely insulated from the 2008-2009 crisis. And that is because they did certain things well beforehand, and they were able to deal with it. They also had a set of people involved in their affairs, in their regulatory affairs, who were very independent, free from political interference, and who were focused on how to make sure that the financial system was healthy and to ensure that nothing stood in the way of the health of the financial system. And therefore, they used their strength and their independence in order to make it strong and to make it effective. And the world learned from them. And I am sure this legislation drew on the experience of Canada as well. And therefore, the point I am making is that regulation and enforcement is not a place for bureaucrats to mark time. I want to emphasize that. We cannot have regulation in this country in the central bank and an inspectorate in the central bank made up of bureaucrats without the necessary knowledge, experience, and I don't mean just qualification, but experience, understanding, exposure, with continuing training and exposure to be able to look after the system. And I am saying that the most important thing in this fat piece of legislation here is the institution that we have created for regulations and the framework that we have created to regulate. But in addition to that, you need strong people. You need independent people, because our institutions fall on weak people who are not independent and who cannot stand up when you have to stand up when things matter. And I am urging the government to depoliticize this entire process. Let the central bank depoliticize this process and make sure that the country benefits from an independent inspectorate in the central bank. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Member for Caroni East.
Madam Speaker, I'm grateful for the opportunity to contribute in some small measure to the discussions on this particular piece of legislation, which is what has come before us in Parliament, is to accept the Joint Select Committee report on this. Be it resolved that the House adopt the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Insurance Bill 2016. And in fact, in dealing with that, when we look at the Insurance Bill 2016, the purpose of the Insurance Bill is to provide basically a new regulatory framework for the insurance industry and to continue to provide for the regulation of privately administered pension fund plans and to repeal the existing Insurance Act, Chapter 8401. So here we have before us a bill which is now to replace the one that was already started about 1976, but came to fruition in 1980, and there was Chapter 8401 Insurance Bill. So as the world progressed, and there are a lot of financial arrangements taking place globally, and even to a smaller extent in Trinidad and Tobago, it became necessary to change the laws relating to fiduciary management in the public sector and in the private sector. And so there had been a 38-year lacunae, or a legislative lacunae, or lacunae, or lacuna, since 1980. It depends on how you pronounce it. And yes, it's plural, lacunae. Various attempts have been made, Madam Speaker, over a period of time to amend the insurance bill. And I think that it was the Attorney General who indicated that there are about 7 or 8 amendments that took place over a period of time. And in 2004, there was a major amendment, and in 2007, there was another major amendment by the Manning's administration. But when the People's Partnership Kamala Persad-Bissessa administration came into office, she was intent on dealing with this insurance industry because, remember, we were saddled when we came into office in 2015, September, by one of the most unfortunate issues this country ever came across in terms of fiduciary responsibility of the central bank. And 2008, 2009 proved to be woeful for thousands and thousands of citizens who took their life savings and all that they have and deposited it in the central, deposited in CLICO, whether it's life or general or annuity. And also HCU, we must not forget that. So we were saddled with a $25 billion debt to thousands of citizens who were really crying and in pain as a result of, I would say, gross irresponsibility on the part of the central bank at that time to deal with what was a matter that they should have dealt with from earlier than 2008. So here we, as a government, coming in and having to deal with a $25 billion messy situation where CLICO and CL Finance and a number of them, a number of other banking institutions, all related to the CLICO group, they put thousands of lives in danger. And people were sick and needing money to look after their health. And their home, they lost their homes, and they lost their lives because they didn't have money to take care of the health situation. And Madam Speaker, that was a painful time. And the country went through some difficult times. And this government, under Kamala Pasabi said in 2010, said, we have to deal with this insurance bill. And 2011, Minister Dukaran took on the mantle at that time as Minister of Finance to lay it in Parliament and begin discussions on this reform of the insurance bill. And he did a great job. And as the Attorney General indicated, he congratulated Minister Dukaran, Minister Hawaii, and of course we mustn't forget Minister Imbut in this time here. I always say when he goes before a joint select committee or a select committee and he chairs it, his mannerisms and his way of conduct in that is exemplary. But when he comes here, it's a different person. It's a different person. So we will not, this is not something that we bring politics into. It's something, the insurance bill is something that the country badly needs. And we recognize that. And as a responsible opposition, we will participate with the government in ensuring that this piece of legislation comes to fruition. It is badly needed. And in fact, I was going through some of the articles related to this insurance industry issue, Madam Speaker. And all the players in the industry were very eager for this to be completed. In fact, there was a newspaper article, I don't have it here with me, which says that this insurance bill goes to the Joint Select Committee and people were high in expectations. And in February 5th, 2017, the Trinidad Guardian Article 1's insurance bill sent to a new Joint Select Committee, and the Attorney General said it has been there before. So they were anxious to have it done, but they wanted to have some discussions on it again. And the Express newspapers of March 20th, 2014, insurance bill moving ahead. That's 2014, when Minister Hawaii had brought that subsequent to Minister Dukaran. And Minister Dukaran, as Minister of Finance, that lapsed, I think in 2011, 2012. Then it was reintroduced again in 2013. It lapsed in 2014, 2015, and so on. And then the banking sector, very anxious to have this passed. There's an article, March 30th, 2016. Scotia Executive appeals to Imbut, make insurance bill top priority. So the country is crying out for it. The financial institutions crying out for it. Guardian Life Head worried by insurance bill delay. That's Monday, August 31st, 2015, Trinidad and Tobago Guardian by Sean Nero. And so the the People's Partnership Government worked very assiduously, and the Attorney General says that he has been part of all the Joint Select Committees. I think it was 5. And he took part in all 24 meetings, 14 under Minister Dukaran and Minister Hawaii, and 10 under Minister Imbut as the Minister of Finance at the moment. So here we are now with a new report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the insurance bill. And as was mentioned, it's 297 pages long. It's 13 parts, 13 schedules, and 7 regulations. Now, to go through 282 clauses on this, it's really a great feat, as though you're studying for a PhD. And this is really a PhD thesis. But at the end of it, our colleagues on our side, member for Tabaquite, the member for Pointe-a-Pierre in this round, and the senators in a joint select committee worked well with the members of the government and the other independent benches to go through clause by clause, 282 clauses, 13 schedules, 13 parts of the bill, and 7 regulations. And of course, it was mentioned the work done by the Chief Parliamentary Counsel and the team, the expert opinions of Attorney Claude Denbo, Senior Counsel, and some major players in the insurance industry. And of course, consultations were held with the Insurance Brokers Association of Trinidad and Tobago, with ICAT, the insurance, the Association of Accounting, and then ATIC as well, the Central Bank, and some international players also came together and presented some work to this Joint Select Committee. And I remember reading the IBAT submission on the insurance bill. That's the insurance brokers. They were concerned about a number of issues which were in the 2014 discussions, and they needed some changes on that. So this Joint Select Committee had to work with these stakeholders and bring about the final report. Now, Madam Speaker, how many insurance companies we have in Trinidad and Tobago? How many life insurance companies? How many general insurance companies? And how many active composite life and general insurance companies? We have 7 active life insurance companies. There's Banker Assurance, CUNA, Maritime Life, Sagicor Life, Scotia Life, Tattle Life, the Demerara Life. And active general insurance companies, 17. Bankers, Capital, Colfire, Export-Import Bank, Furnace, Anchorage, Nagico, Guardian General, Gulf Insurance, Maritime, Motor One Insurance, Sagicor, the Insurance Company of the West Indies, Great Northern Insurance, New India, Presidential Insurance, Trinidad and Tobago Insurance, and United Insurance. And then 7 active, both life and general, Pan American Life, British American, Colonial Life, Guardian Life, Mega Insurance, Trinity Insurance, Beacon Insurance. And then there's the active association of underwriters, Lloyd's Underwriters. My colleague, the member for Caroni Central, felt very strong about the necessity for acute surveillance in this insurance industry. Because I'm sure with 500 motorists with insurance, 500,000, and thousands more with life, and thousands more with general, and fire, and everything, we possibly have close to 1 million policy holders in Trinidad and Tobago. And they would be insured by the life 7 and the general 17, and the 7, the composite life and general. So even though, Madam Speaker, we have this large, thick bill and report that we want to have passed and accepted in Parliament today, hopefully, we have to ask some serious questions. How does the central bank, with a supervisor or an inspector, be able to monitor 24 insurance companies who have thousands of policy holders and be able to pick up in a quick space of time when things go wrong. That was the major problem in 28-29. The supervisor of insurance made the excuse that they did not have the legal clout to deal with the matters, although they could have done a number of other things and stopped the CLICO debacle from ensuing. But they did not do it. And my colleague, I remember when we were in opposition, my colleague from Oropoch East indicated of how people at Christmas time and New Year's time, when at Old Year's night they should be going out and having a good time and liming. They put their head in curlers, their hair in curlers, and went to the central bank to get their money. And they're gone down by the bank. And then when another member of the House at that time heard about that and went for her money, they say, nah, you can't get no money. I think the Prime Minister at that time, he told her, nah, don't bother with that. Don't go and take your money out. So the question is, Madam Speaker, I don't know if any of our colleagues here in this House had money in CLICO at that time, but thank God I didn't have any. So who really is to supervise and look at the work and function of all these insurance companies in a responsible and in a diligent manner to pick up the wrongs that some of these insurance companies might be perpetrating on their policyholders? So we can pass this from today to infinity. This is law. And as my colleagues and even the Attorney General indicated, we have to have the efficiency and the effectiveness within the system where the responsibility lies to be able to do it. But how many human resource personnel we have in that inspectorate? Or
no, member.
Yes.
I'm going to warn you with respect to TD's repetition. I think the issue about human resource capacity and so was really dealt with very thoroughly by the previous speaker. Please move on.
Now, the issue here too, Madam Speaker, I downloaded this from the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago website. And comparing 2008 to 2016, about the funding that were accompanied different contracts across the time. And in 2016, we have 2 pages of financial reports and financial statements ranging from insurance contracts, ordinary life, group pension, deposit administration, assets, bank deposits, assets, total investments, gross premium, gross claims, billions of dollars. The insurance contracts for ordinary life in 2016 was $3.9 billion. The deposit administration was $1.05 billion. And the insurance contracts for life insurance companies total $16 billion. Life insurance companies' investments, $18 billion. And life insurance companies, $10 billion. And assets, total life insurance companies, $23 billion. So we're really dealing with a multi-billion-dollar industry, and as indicated by the Minister of Finance, he said, we're dealing with a $50 billion industry, which is close to about 1/3 of the national GDP. But other speakers mentioned $30 billion approximately. Where does the pension plan, perhaps the Honorable Minister of Finance can answer, how much does the pension plan contribute to this financial issue related to the assets and so on for insurance companies and insurance premiums and policyholders together with pension plans. I don't think we have any idea, from a national perspective at least. I was trying to do the research to find out how many pension plans, private pension plans we have in the country. I haven't been able to get the answer. So perhaps the Minister of Finance might be able to tell us. And what is the value of the private funded pension plans across the country? I'm bringing this up because it's a very important issue, because people deposit the money into private pension plans. Companies fold up, the pension plans fold up, and people lose all their pension and find at the end that they have no money and they depended on their pension to carry them through for a period of time. And I just remember one little example when BWIA was recapitalized.
But member, could you relate that to the bill being debated under this motion, please?
Yes, Madam Speaker. I'm relating it to the shortcomings in the regulatory framework for the pension plans and for the insurance industry. Yeah. So it all ties back. When BWIA was recapitalized and refunded to the tune of about $2.5 billion, and there was a pension plan with BWIA, they moved to CAL. Up to now, the people who had pension plans at BWIA have not been settled, as far as I'm aware. And that is almost 15 years now. So all those people who gave their life in BWIA and had pension plans, at the end of it, they have nothing now, and nothing has been settled for them. So it was the work of the IMF and the World Bank that identified legislative gaps in this insurance bill, in the insurance industry. They said that there were major shortcomings in the regulatory framework. Conglomerates were becoming dominant. And let me just mention, as it is now, I see that Guardian Holdings Limited is under some pressure. Whether there is going to be a takeover of Guardian Holdings Limited, by whom, and the country, people who have shares within Guardian Holdings Limited are anxious to know what is happening there, just as the TCL group had been taken over by Cibex, and people sold out their shares and made a profit.
CIMEX and so on, relevance. We're dealing here with the insurance bill, please.
Madam Speaker, this is loss of people's income. The people who matters, the policy holders, are very critical to this piece of income. It is because we want to protect their assets and we want to protect their pension funds. And we have to ensure that these insurance companies work in a manner that is going to give relief and support to these individuals with the policies. So the IMF and the World Bank said that there was a contagion effect because we saw it worldwide in 2008, 2009. And it has been mentioned about the inadequate buffers of 1 million and 3 million for life and general insurance in share capital, and inadequate risk governance. So this bill needed, Madam Speaker, to correct some of those shortcomings with newer responsibilities of the boards and stronger responsibility of the boards with adequate duty of care and adequate supervision of conglomerates. And we are still not seeing adequate supervision of conglomerates even after we've seen the CLICO debacle. Then the regulatory authority. Who is the regulator? Who appoints the regulator? Where is that regulator coming from? What will be his function? And the Attorney General spoke about the pieces of regulations, which include stemming excessive risk-taking by management and boards of regulatory authorities, audit committee, which consists of 3 directors, independent person and a finance person, and board of directors must ensure transaction, robust balance sheet and capital buffers, the financial capital, and adequate assets. So with a $15 billion industry, we need to protect the society's assets. And this is where the deeper consultations came in with all the players, and amendments came in on this bill relating to annuity contracts, offenses, whether they were summary, indictable, and hybrid, the issue of fines, whether there was custodial sentencing, issue of FATCA, central bank, to issue guidelines, and ratio of local to foreign assets, and maximum permissible foreign assets now increased from 20% to 30%.
Member for
and the issue of strict
yes.
liabilities and offenses.
Members, it's now 4:30. This House now stands suspended for 30 minutes. We resume at 5 p.m.